Hi, Alex Simon, advocate with CoPIRG, here today again with one of our conversations from the Capitol, today with Senator Faith Winter. Senator Winter sponsored a few different exciting pieces of legislation that CoPIRG backed this past session, including a set of initiatives to tackle air pollution through investments in transportation, which will sponsor 1 month of fare-free transit from RTD and other agencies across the state starting August 1st. She also sponsored bills that'll help mitigate lead contamination in schools' drinking water and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yay, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about these important pieces of legislation.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into some of these really interesting bills, I was hoping you could just give us a little bit of background about what motivated you to get into politics in the first place.
Sure. Two things really happened is one, I was in college and I was an environmental management major. So really working on climate issues from a really early age and realizing that you could have all the science and research in the world, but if you weren't putting that science and research behind policy, it wasn't going to actually make a difference. At the same time, I worked in a homeless shelter and I realized the same thing about service work. The service work was really, really important, but it was a temporary band-aid to a system that was broken. And so I became a community organizer because I wanted to change systems. And for me, that means building power through people and getting people to take collective action. And one of the best ways to do that is to lead by governing, doing collaborative governance, bringing people to the table, giving community power, and solving problems.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And, we do a lot of grassroots organizing at CoPIRG as well. So it's really cool to hear someone who's come up from that community organizing perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I mentioned, you sponsored a big bill this session, SB 180, that had a package of initiatives to address Colorado's increasing air pollution. Why was tackling air pollution important to you personally?
Tackling air pollution is so important to me. I have two children that have developing lungs, and sometimes they can't go outside and play because it's too dangerous. I also live with my elderly dad who has some lung issues. And recently, I just ended up having some pretty severe lung issues. And so it's impacting the health of myself and my kids and my family, but also making sure we're addressing the climate crisis. And part of addressing this climate crisis is working on the transportation issues. And we can't electrify our way out of knowing that transportation is the #1 carbon emitter in Colorado. And if we are going to meet our carbon reduction goals, we have to increase public transit. And one way to do that is offer free public transit.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that offering free transit is a really great way to increase ridership, and that increased ridership is an important long-term strategy for reducing air pollution. So as you probably know, we at CoPIRG were really big supporters of the 1 month of fare-free transit. Again, that's from RTD and other participating agencies across the state. Was there one aspect or initiative in this bill that you were most excited or passionate about?
I'm just excited to get people on public transit wherever that is. So this is also going to help us increase Mustang services, Pegasus services to address traffic on I-70, obviously RTD, which is one of the largest transit agencies in the country. And then in Colorado, we have more rural public transit than any other state in the country. Something we should be really proud of, something we should embrace, and making sure all those rural agencies could participate too was really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great to see. And I'm so excited to see the plan go into action, less than 2 weeks away.
Yep.
So
So everyone get on a bus or a train and experience some public transit. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're excited to have some fun initiatives and participating scavenger hunts and fun things like that going on throughout the month of August to just help get people excited about it.
That's great.
Yeah. And so I know we're talking a little bit, talking about air pollution, air quality. You sponsored another bill that seeks to address greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. This bill has a few different components. It includes model language for solar and electric, some low energy and carbon, green codes. How did you come to sponsor this bill, and why was addressing pollution from this particular sector something you wanted to do this past session?
Um, for a long time, a priority of mine has been to address the climate crisis. And in 2019, I was one of the sponsors of a really important bill called 1261 that set carbon reduction goals in Colorado that align with science, right? So I talked about being a scientist, we need to make sure we're reducing our carbon. And there's 5 significant sectors that release carbon. The number one is transportation, we just talked about that. The second is the electric sector, and there's been a lot of work done there. But the third is actually coming from our built environment and being smart about how we build, making sure that we're building it right first, making sure as we're growing and retrofitting, we're reducing the carbon imprint from our built environment. And that saves consumers money as well as saving the environment and saving the climate.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's really important, especially because buildings last for such a long time. You know, we build them for the next 100 years. So building them the right way for our health and our planet now is so important.
Yes.
Cool. Well, before you go, just to switch topics a little bit, you also sponsored a really important bill that's going to help, that will require schools to test for lead in drinking water and remediate sources where lead contamination is found. Why was this something you chose to get involved in?
This is really important because no amount of lead is safe for our children to be drinking. And every parent, regardless of where you live in Colorado, should feel safe sending their children to school and having them drink water. Because the impacts of lead on developing young minds can be lifelong lasting and detrimental. And so making sure that we're keeping our children safe is essential, while also recognizing that we ask a lot of our schools. We ask them to do more every single year. We underfund our schools, underpay our school professionals and our teachers. So we could just add this on to something that our schools should be doing. So making sure we're providing the resources in a way that makes sense. So both the monetary and technical resources to get this done and keep all children in Colorado safe.
I think that's great. And, you know, as a mother of a 3-year-old, it's a bill that especially meant a lot to me to see passed. What do you hope to see as next steps on this issue?
Next steps on this issue is really just tracking where the lead is, if there's trends, making sure the mitigation is going well. And then recently there's been some articles about lead in apartment buildings. So I think next year I'm going to be working on making sure that we're keeping people safe that live in multifamily housing from having lead in their drinking water.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate your leadership and your insight on these issues. Thanks for joining me and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you to all your members, because really we can't pass legislation like this by ourselves. CoPIRG was instrumental in making sure, turning you all out to support these pieces of legislation, and together we got it done. And I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much. Oh, here's my stuff.